Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dollar Auction Show All-Time High Edition with Alex and Shimon. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. We hit officially the all-time high. We are at the all-time high currently. Apparently, we hit the all-time high intraday a couple of days ago, which caused me to shave off my mustache because that was the agreement I made with my wife that I will keep it until all-time high. I shaved it off. It was intraday, but you, Alex, said that it doesn't count unless we have the daily close above the all-time high. So
I don't want this little blip up and down. Let's do the whole thing. Let's give it a nice big push.
yeah.
What are we at now, Shimon?
Currently, as we're recording this, we're at $69,452 for Bitcoin.
We're making a run for it again. I mean, if, by the way, Coinbase crashed like earlier today. It went up to 70, like 70 and 100 or something along those lines. Crashed. Let me see what the all-time high technically was. 70, 184. At least on Bitstamp.
Mm-hmm.
Coinbase crashes, dumps. Then it's like a V-shaped recovery up. Now we're literally going for it. These candles, the candles that go for it is just like a monster candle. We're watching us in real time, kind of watching us live. Maybe I should just share my screen and show this. There we go.
Watch
Let's show.
party. There's so many YouTube channels that had a watch party.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at this monster candle coming up. By the way, monster candle up, monster candle down. I was watching. I was like, just falling, falling, falling. Boom, V-shaped recovery. And look at this. It's on like a stair step up. It's really making a run for it. So we're kind of doing this live, our friends. 69,373.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting analogy, which is people say this about the stock market, which is like it takes the stairs up and the elevator down. So basically the economy is growing as a whole, so like slowly the stock market always goes up. There's another term that says stocks climb a wall of worry, right? Like people, when you break an all-time high in the stock market, everybody's worried that it's a bubble and keeps climbing up, and then a recession happens or something happens and there's a crazy drop. So I heard on a podcast today that Bitcoin is exactly the opposite of that, which is for most of the time it fizzles down, and then from time to time you have these crazy moves up, and this is why I'm really happy that I'm not trading, because like, to Michael Saylor's point, whatever the model is that explains what happened until now, it could literally be destroyed by new information that comes into the system. So I'm very, very happy to not trade. And the only trading I do is like when there's a big drop, if I feel that I have excess liquidity elsewhere, I will buy. But I've basically never sold a Bitcoin in my life.
I've sold some. I sold some at like 45 and then tried to buy back in at 20. So it worked out for me now, but I have many, many, many trades that have failed me pretty spectacularly. So while I have one or two that are good, most of my trades, it's so hard to time these things. And then the opportunity cost, you trade out of one thing and then to another thing. You're like, but wait a second, that I traded out of stocks, and sold one. I'm like, now I'm going into the other. And then the best trade we've done, and this is timestamped, was selling S&P 500, buying Nasdaq. I think that was the macro trade. That was a fantastic trade, and of course buying Bitcoin.
Well, and let's talk about this a little bit because, Alex, we started this podcast in 2019, and I was very clear that I'm not looking to make money from this, which means I just wanted to basically have deep intellectual conversations with you. I mean, back when we started, I was living in San Francisco, you were in DC. Now both of us are in DC, so it's much more awesome. But the idea was like, let's timestamp our predictions in real time. And one of the big themes in 2019, and this was even before COVID, which I'm very proud of, because everybody was huge tech after the COVID lockdowns where everybody was working from home. And so literally I had friends working in Shopify and these like e-commerce places, and they say, oh my God, every day is like Black Friday now. It's like, yeah, of course, when you can't go to the store, of course, every day online will be like Black Friday. But in 2019, that wasn't necessarily the case. And we basically said, look, technology will go into everything. If I remember our thesis correctly, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we said technology will go into everything. And so let's say you're a cement production company, right? And then there's some artificial intelligence algorithm that makes you produce cement more efficiently, who is going to capture the value? The cement company or the AI company that's selling software to the cement company? And our key thesis was that the software company will capture the most or the vast majority of the value that comes from the improvement. It has played out. It couldn't have played out better, if you ask me.
Well, so not only is it played out, we had this conversation about Biden versus Trump and Biden infrastructure deal. We're like, look, it's not going to be cement, like cement companies, it's going to be AI, drones, and so on. It played out really, really well. And this is also goes to our thesis of Bitcoin and everything we talk about. We're in on Bitcoin for many reasons, but we're talking about it constantly, not just because there are many Bitcoin podcasts that regurgitate the same thing. We do as well. And we're definitely not making money from this podcast. But we do it because we really believe in the thesis. We believe in the tech thesis. We believe the technology is eating the world, and Bitcoin and AI now, and machine learning and self-driving vehicles. This is very much a Kathy Wood thesis. Incidentally, we came up with this thesis on our own without listening to Kathy Wood. Again, you can timestamp. You can go back. And I didn't know who Kathy Wood was until the COVID days came up. So we were on it, but this is because you worked at, we both worked at BCG. You came from tech, you came from a lot of startups. I was at Microsoft for a while. I did strategy at Microsoft. We both understand tech. I think many people misunderstand tech. They misunderstand exponential curves and S curves.
Yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to talk about on the tech front that I heard on podcast this week. Super interesting. First of all, I'm reducing my podcast content that's around Bitcoin. I'm not going to zero, but like I reduced it by like 50%, and then I'm listening to hardcore like tech podcasts, and it's so hardcore that sometimes I don't understand what they're talking about, but it's great because then I have to like Google different terms and stuff, and I just feel personally it's very rewarding to me. So I learned two things this week that I think our listeners would love to know. One is apparently Tesla has this full self-driving 12 algorithm where they completely changed the self-driving algorithm. When I say completely changed, to the words of Brad, well, I don't know, the podcast is called BG Squared, and uh, wow, I forgot the name. It's Gerstner and Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner. Okay, so one of them basically said, look, they have this code written in C++ that tells you, okay, if you get this signal, this is a stop sign. If you see this thing, it's a yellow light, whatever. And it was all kind of like tagged and coded. They deleted all of that code base and replaced it with large language models that basically take as input. They basically identified the top 0.0 point something percent of drivers because they have the telemetry, and they let them opt in into a system that basically makes the software better. And these drivers, they literally record everything from them. It's gigabytes and gigabytes of information. And then overnight, when the car is parked and connected to Wi-Fi, it streams all that data to Tesla. And they did it over 3 years. They were training this model. And basically now they deleted the old model, put up the new model, which is literally the input is just video. The output is like accelerate, brake, or turn the wheel. That's it. And it's all kind of an AI black box. Nobody knows how it's making decisions, but it's objectively much, much better than the previous code. And the more interesting thing is, and this I could understand that it's objectively better because I use ChatGPT and I see how ChatGPT is better than Google. So like anything where you program the search algorithm versus like just let the large language model give you the answer, I could understand how it's better. But one thing that I missed, he said it's infinitely more scalable. So like you can literally scale this much easier because then apparently another thing that I learned is for machine learning, it's not about the quantity of data, but it's about the breadth of situations that the data covers, right? So like if I have like a distribution of drivers, the most valuable things are these edge cases that only happen 100 or 200 times, uh, but like you can learn from them. And so if you double the amount of video of people just driving on the highway without any incident, it doesn't improve your model. But if you just add one video of someone like completely taking over the self-driving in some crazy edge situation, that can improve even driving on the highway. I don't understand how it works. If I remember statistics, I remember that there's something very valuable about the tails of the distribution, but that's all I remember. Now, why
Nadir,
genius? Why is this genius?
Well,
And I'll finish.
yeah.
It's genius because by moving to this model, they solidify their moat because they have so many cars driving around that they can just like get this data for much much cheaper. Like apparently the other company that's owned by Google, what they do, each car costs $150,000. So like even if they wanted to give the cars away for free and just cover the cost so people can drive and generate this data, it's prohibitively expensive. Versus with Tesla, people pay them to drive the car, and because they switched to this model, it made their full self-driving even more of a moat. So I'll pause here. I want to hear your thoughts.
I think the edge cases that maybe the way to think about it is we can have 1,000 drivers to drive on the highway, on ramp, merge with no cars on the highway. Let's say it's a clear highway. You can have 1,000 cars, lots of data, but it's the exact same scenario. So you're not really learning anything. You're enforcing a very easy case. Or driving, let's say, on a street with light traffic. How often we were in your Tesla once, in the middle of DC. It was night. It was raining. There was a car in front of us. A bicyclist trying to come around the car. A car in front of us. Parked car. A short street. A car behind him. A bicyclist behind that car. Both car and the bicyclist are trying to come around the parked car on our side of the street. And the other way it comes on the car. Now look, the Tesla didn't fully take on that situation, and you had to step in a little bit, but it did most of it. And that's an edge case of an edge case. Like, how often are you going to find that? That was a tough thing for any driver to do, let alone some kind of vehicle. And then it learns, hey, this situation, all these different things have happened, but you can't program this. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be in the QA environment and somebody's like, I know what I'll do. 3 parked cars, a bicyclist, a moped. Like, that just happens in real life. So I think this is why you need that variance, you need those edge cases, because it's easy to build in tech, it's easy to build for the 90%. And then the last mile, as it's called, is extremely hard to do. And that takes the most of your time. But in something as critical as self-driving vehicles, where you can't make a mistake, you can't do the 80-20 rule, where it's like 80% of the time it'll work, 20% of the time it doesn't. You do that with like some sort of consumable good. Okay, I have an iPhone, I click on on an app and it crashes. Okay, so I go through and it's annoying. I reinstall the app, no problem. A car literally can't crash because it can cost lives. So you have to build out to the 100th percentile, and that's really hard.
Yeah, but then the other thing that was really interesting is they said they basically all they did as an input for the model is basically try to predict what the good drivers will do. And that made it much more smooth. So that's the other thing, which is like if you try to program something, it's jerky. Like I was like sometimes in my car and like it would jerk to the left or to the right, and it would all be safe. Like it knows how to keep enough distance from everything, so it's actually a very safe car. It's just not very pleasant because they were trying to program in the previous thing. They were trying to say, oh, if this happens, go left, and so go left can be very jerky under certain circumstances. Versus if you have a good driver, they will never take a sharp left.
Hmm.
And so that's just genius, and it made me think. Oh, and another thing they said is like you really needed everything to fall into place. So just like with Facebook, the only reason, I mean, not the only reason, but like the main reason why Facebook succeeded when MySpace didn't is because Facebook launched in colleges when uploading an image suddenly became cheap enough so you could allow people to upload infinite images. Versus like MySpace, I think they had like some limitation on how much stuff you can upload, and then that basically created just like a poor user experience. So it's the same with Tesla. They said you had to be able to first of all have fast internet, right? Like if you can't like just park your car and it uploads gigabytes and gigabytes of data, like it wouldn't work. If you didn't have cheap storage, like the storage of Tesla with all these like I don't even know the order of magnitude of data they have, right? If the storage is too expensive, not feasible. And then you also had to have like the sensors and everything to be cheap enough, right? So all these cameras and stuff, right? Like 10 years ago, the cameras were just very expensive. And so few people could afford the car. The car would have been too expensive. So you basically need all of that to come together. And then suddenly self-driving happens. And it just makes me think a lot about AI and about how when we have more sensors, when we have more wearables, when we have like when we input more data into these AI algorithms, something magical can happen very soon. because like all these things are coming together.
The singularity, as you call it, the singularity. You were telling me about this. You're like, are we in the singularity? The Nasdaq keeps on going up. By the way, Nasdaq has been going up so much. It's it's a little worrisome. I mean, not in the long term, just in the short term. It's I don't understand what's really driving it. Like,
If only
nothing
it
new
had a
is in it.
store of value that didn't depend on cash flows, then it would not have an upper limit. If only such a thing would exist.
Yeah, like Bitcoin, the cockroach of all cockroaches.
Tell us about the cockroach, Alex.
And also, The Economist wrote this article about Bitcoin, and within the article, if you read the text, it's fairly balanced. It's like, hey, there's this thing, it's speculative, etc., etc. But the image was like the cockroach is back, essentially, and they
And
literally called it a
graph
cockroach.
of Bitcoin's price, and the title was
Yeah,
"The Cockroach is Back," which is, by the way, I want to open here a parenthesis to say this is how the media manipulates you. The media doesn't manipulate you by lying, and the media definitely doesn't manipulate you by showing the part that they want to manipulate you about in a very prominent place. What they do is they choose where to show it, how often to show it, and when to talk about stuff, right? Like when Bitcoin is down, everybody was dunking on El Salvador and Bukele's like decision to buy it. But when Bitcoin is up, the same people didn't like revisit the story, didn't say, hey, we want to update you now that it's the safest place in the Western Hemisphere, and like they're doing great and their GDP is growing like crazy. It's time to revisit our previous 2022 article where we said that this guy is an authoritarian and took over the Supreme Court and jailed everybody without free trial and gambled all his people's money on Bitcoin. They never.
speaking of, they never do. Let me show you my screen. There's somebody posted this, like all the bad takes. Bill Gates, I would short Bitcoin if I could. This was May 17th, 2018. Okay, had he shorted, he would have been completely wrecked. Rubini, when about Salvador, El Salvador is bankrupt, and this is November 10th, 2020. They're bankrupt regardless of whether it had any Bitcoin FTX. With Bitcoin at these levels, they are insolvent. So that criminal Bukele should be in jail. Yeah, exactly. For the rest of his life,
Supposed to
regardless
be a
of.
professor in NYU. Doesn't he? Isn't he supposed to know what's the definition of the word insolvent? Like, I'm seriously asking. Like, how
He
can you
should.
just trash your whole reputation by using the wrong terminology in the thing that you're a professor of?
Who I can't answer this question, Shimon, but he goes on and on about that. Charlie Munger called it rat poison. Um,
Well,
of
Charlie
course,
reminds me of that graffiti that basically says "God is dead, Nietzsche," and then Nietzsche is dead, God. So I'll leave it at
yeah.
that.
Donald Trump, who now then after saying Bitcoin is a scam,
I
he wants.
forgive Donald Trump because he repented. He is pro Bitcoin now, so I forgive him only about his Bitcoin takes. I don't forgive him about other stuff, but
What about his NFTs that he launched and
I
his
do not,
Donald Trump shoes?
I do not forgive that.
Jamie Dimon, of course, the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank. Peter Schiff continues. I think now at this point, Peter Schiff, he just does it. This is engagement farming. I
Yeah,
think he knows better.
for sure, for sure.
He doesn't really mean it. I mean, like it's just too stupid to keep on doing it. Gary Gensler, of
Peter
course,
Schiff
Elizabeth Warren.
engagement friend, and I'll tell you why. Because he's actually very good at identifying the problems with the economy. He just like thinks that gold is the solution and not Bitcoin. So he's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna dunk on Bitcoin. Like we have an amazing Professor Saint Onge, Peter Saint Onge, that I'm sponsoring his podcast through Unchained, the company where I work, and he's
Mm-hmm.
amazing because his looks are very sober. He works for the Heritage Foundation, so he was traditionally very pro gold. Then he became pro Bitcoin, but he doesn't like dunk on gold just because Bitcoin is rallying and very sober view of like this is a better form of gold and it will replace gold over time. We don't know how long it will take, and I don't understand how can Peter Schiff just not understand that. Like he has to, he absolutely has to. Anyway,
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Ben McKenzie, this OC guy who's a famous Bitcoin hater, and I don't know why we're listening to a guy from
yeah,
a
I'm not.
show about teenagers and OC. Francis Cassandra
Oh no,
Coppola,
come
she
on.
is fantastic.
Stop. Like these guys don't matter. Like Francis Coppola, like
He
Larry
needs.
Fink, Bill Gates. Those guys are, you know. Those
Keith
are
McCullough, who does all these, he does like macro, whatever, sold all his Bitcoin in 2020. Nassim Taleb, baby, Nassim Taleb.
Saim Talib is such a heart-breaking story because I learned through Saifedean. So he's Lebanese, and he's considered one of the most successful Lebanese people living abroad. And so people actually listen to him when he says that Bitcoin is bad. And Lebanon had a hyperinflation, and so he could have saved so many people. And instead, he hurt so many people by saying that Bitcoin is bad.
Yeah,
And this is in Saifedean Ammous's words. He literally said, if I hadn't heard of Bitcoin, even though I was a professor at the most prestigious university at Lebanon, which is called American University, or University of America, so it's basically the most
yeah,
prestigious,
American, yeah.
he wouldn't have been able to feed his family because of the hyperinflation. And because he has Bitcoin now, he's very wealthy and he has a publishing house publishing Bitcoin books. It's amazing. So, like, thank you, Nassim Taleb, for the disservice to your country.
Thank you. Warren Buffett is next. Dave Ramsey, Warren Buffett, I knew. Dave Ramsey, I didn't know. He does financial advice. He's the guy this, uh, uh, the financial expert who said it's going to crash to zero. Exactly. You're stupid. You're going to lose your money. He says, by the way, this guy goes on and on talking about people should buy a house, but you should put no more than a fourth down payment on the house. This was on Twitter. The median income for the U.S. is 74,000, which basically means that there's no way you can buy a house, and the average household price is like 350,000. So 350,000, call it 360 to make it easy. If you're only putting a fourth down, you got to put $90,000 down. That interest payment on the rest of the debt is going to cost you like $4,000 a month, interest and taxes and so on. If you're making $74,000 a year, first of all, where are you going to get 90K to put down? 74 after taxes, let's call it like 60. Divided by 12, it's 5. So out of the $5,000 a month post tax, 4 of them are going to the house. There's no way. So thanks, Dave Ramsey. Thanks. And of course, our favorite boy, Jim Cramer, Jimbo, who sold at, when he sold, 39,000. Bitcoin is up to 26,000 in 6 weeks since he said he had, it was, what is it? Tough town and unlikely to find its footing. Who? Paul Krugman, of course. Bitcoin is evil. Thanks, Paul Krugman.
He also said that the internet will not have more impact than the fax machine. So
Oh,
anyway, I'm just saying, look, it's not a good use of our time to list all these people out. The thing I'm proud of is we did have a thesis, and it's playing out really nicely on both
yes.
and the in Bitcoin. Now, I wanted to ask you something else since you understand energy much better than me. So there was another piece of news that I think is super important, which is that Amazon is building a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania to power
Yay.
a data center. And it just made me think that both Bitcoin and AI created new demand for energy that did not exist before. Like before, the demand for energy was pretty much a function of the GDP, so it had a very kind of a GDP plus population growth, so it had like a cap. But now, for the first time, each person on average can use more energy on regardless of the source. That's what's nice. Like before, you had like, oh, people use more electricity and less like whatever fossil fuel. No, I'm talking about energy in general. So what do you think? Where do you see the energy world going? Will we get to a utopia where the energy is super, super cheap and it makes us really competitive on the global market?
I think we will. Look, for our listeners, using more energy doesn't make you green or not green. This whole discussion about, oh, we're using Bitcoin, others are using energy, now they're less green. That's bullshit. It's a bullshit discussion. Throughout time, human progress has been measured by how much energy we use. And even when we look at all of the sci-fi movies, the ships that are flying through space, every ship flying through space in all of our sci-fi favorite shows and movies has a nuclear reactor in the back of the ship that literally puts out, tons of energy to move the ship through space. So if we're going to go there, let's say we're going to go be intergalactic and we're going to jump light years, right? How are we going to do that? By with windmills and coal plants? Of course, we're going to use energy. So then the question becomes, what kind of energy you use? Nobody's saying we should go and burn coal for Bitcoin. That's terrible, of course. But nuclear is clean. It's a clean source of energy. And it's a gigantic source of energy. It's a source of abundance of energy. So I think Bitcoin and AI is already getting a backlash for the data centers and energy. It's going to incentivize renewables. AI, not as much as Bitcoin, by the way. And
Why?
and
Why do you think so?
yeah, so Bitcoin has this Bitcoin mining has a unique characteristic where um,
Be-
latency,
uh-huh.
what
I
latency doesn't matter,
yeah.
and and demand response can be quickly turned on and off. So in electricity markets, you have the distribution center, which sends you your bills. You have the generation center, essentially the generation company, which generates electricity, and you have the interconnect. The interconnect with dispatch, it's a quasi-government organization essentially, and it's they monitor the load balance between demand and supply. They project out how much demand is going to be needed. But sometimes you get these power shocks. It gets super hot. Everyone comes home, turns on the AC units. You have to be able to reduce demand. Bitcoin miners can quickly, and by the way, there's demand response within like a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a half an hour, an hour. You're not going to go and turn off a hospital. Okay. So you need at scale demand response to quickly turn off so that you're balancing the grid. Bitcoin miners can do that. Okay. So you miss mining Bitcoin, you get some sort of tariff, it's called, from the government,
Mhm.
which it's like an option for the government. AI is, you can't turn off AI because if AI is crunching something, some sort of compute, and for example, for autonomous vehicles or for hospitals, you can't just turn that off. It's quite, you might be crunching, again, depending on what you're crunching where. If you're asking ChatGPT, how do I get to the closest McDonald's? Yeah, maybe that can wait a few seconds until it reroutes you to a new center. If you're saying, hey, autonomous vehicle, if it's not at the edge, if it's hitting some sort of cloud, where should I go, here or there? Or it's some critical compute, virtual reality, when we use these examples, a doctor is using VR glasses to do an operation, in a different country. You cannot have that compute, the cloud essentially, have latency, one, and then be able to turn it on and off. Now, what does this do with renewables? I'll just quickly add. When you can't have latency, you have to bring it close to the essentially to where cities, because you need roads and so on and so forth. In fact, when people create wind plants, one of the most expensive parts of wind plants is a road or hydro to get to the site. Bitcoin, you can just have a data center, nothing around it, and it can be in the middle of nowhere. I actually think that AI has to be closer to the cities. It has to be closer to the
Mm.
interconnect, so you don't have as much latency, and so AI will have to be closer to the cities. So anyway, that's mine. But both require a lot of energy, and the fact that Amazon is building a nuclear power plant because they want it to be really close to the generation. You don't want to have line losses. The friction, the resistance in the lines, in the power lines, loses power. It can lose 20-30% of power depending on how far you are. So anyway, I kind of rambled a little bit, but hopefully people can understand the energy markets a little.
Well, no, I think this is fantastic, but I actually wanted to ask you. I didn't know that you had to have it close to the population. Like basically, I thought that to train the AI model is what takes the most amount of compute, and then you can like take your time doing it. So I actually thought it was intermittent. So I learned something new here, that AI cannot be intermittent. That's fascinating.
Look, maybe look, I'm a bit conflating AI and real time compute for maybe kind of IoT. I'm thinking not you can train the model in one place. That can be for sure intermittent. I'm talking about at scale AI when it's in the middle of all of our goods, and let's say a vehicle spinning the cloud needs to get compute to come back. You need to have very low latency for that. Latency can literally kill. That's why you have a lot of AI, like NVIDIA is building AI into the chip, so you can do AI
Yep.
at the it's called at the edge essentially.
Yeah,
So I don't believe.
spoke about that in the podcast that a lot of the stuff is done at the edge, but like you need a trained model in order to do
Yes.
compute at the edge. And then I actually thought that training a model is exactly, this reminds me in South America when I was backpacking, there are places where the electricity is intermittent, and so wealthy people have like a pump and a big container for water at the roof of their building. And so then when you have electricity, you pump the water up to the roof. And then when you don't have electricity, you can still get water, So I'm thinking, is that like a similar analogy for training models, which is like when you have excess electricity, you can train the models. And then when it's a hot day and everybody turns on their AC, you just stop training the models here. Or maybe you distribute your model training all over the world, and then like you move to training the model on a cold, like in another place where it's cold, but the electricity is a little bit more expensive. You can arbitrage that. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I
You
don't
have this
know
demand for energy, to your point, that's not required in this moment. Both Bitcoin and AI, it's like you can use compute and store it. That's the
yeah.
insight. Before, you had to use the compute when you needed it, but now you have demand for compute that can be stored.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. That the fact that that you're able to store, this is why Saylor talks about digital energy. You're able to store it and then export it. And then let's say you're producing when you have access, you buy Bitcoin, that holds a lot of value, especially over time. Then you need to buy electricity. Now you can buy more, right? Or you can fund more expensive electricity. Sometimes renewables can be quite expensive. So we're going to see a new world. But I'm also, as an aside, I'm also super excited that AI is driving development of nuclear, because we want to be able, you had this point earlier, so I'll steal your thunder a little bit, but this point is attributable to Shimon, is that over time, we're going to get good at building. We already, the nuclear technology we have today is quite different than like Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or even Fukushima. We have modern nuclear reactors, small cell nuclear. And so the more of these that get built, the more you ascend the learning curve, and the better and better and better we're going to have nuclear power plants. So you're going to have small nuclear power plants. Small plant can power a city, obviously depending on what size. But these things are immensely helpful and 100% green. There's no emissions really from them. Um, you have to have backup systems. There's caveat, right? You need to be able to cool them, backup cooling, etc., etc., etc. So you do need some systems, some generators in case something fails. But all things being equal, it's a very, very clean source of electricity. And the more we build it, the better we're going to get at building these.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. And the thing is with energy is like, so it has so many downstream effects. It's literally upstream of everything. But the problem is with politicians, I hear these stupid arguments. For example, people say, why should we invest in going to Mars when there are poor people that don't have enough food on Earth? And like, I can't even start to answer this argument, right? I literally cannot. It's like you can say this about any investment in research and development. You can always say, do not invest in
Yeah.
research and development because there's poor people that don't have enough food. And so the demand here, I think that's the magical part. And I don't think enough people are talking about it, both for AI and for Bitcoin. I don't think enough people are talking about how we just generated a step function in demand for power, even though there was no step function in population growth and there was no breakthrough in energy technology. And that's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
I agree. I hope we just use it. I hope we build more and more nuclear power plants. It'll
We
only be
will.
good for us in long.
We will. I'll tell you why. Because the we spoke about a multipolar world, and so until now, energy was a lot of the cause for wars. Did you know, by the way, that the reason the Japanese attacked the U.S. in World War II is because the U.S. did a blockade, some sort of blockade that didn't allow them to buy enough oil, didn't allow the Japanese to buy enough oil,
Oh,
and
that's right. I did know that. I did know that.
so all of the, like, so many wars. Hitler basically, he really wanted to get into Russia in order to get to the oil fields. He really, the El Alamein battle, which was the most important turning point of World War II, is because like he could have, if he would have conquered Egypt, he would have just kept going to Saudi Arabia and Iraq was like a British, I think British control. It was like Allied controlled, and so because the Allies basically took a lot of the Ottoman Empire after World War One. So just think about it. It's like everything is about energy, but now that we have infinite energy through nuclear, suddenly there's no demand. There's no demand for energy. That's why the US is disengaging from the world stage. That's why they're
Yeah.
disengaging from the Middle East and all of that, because they're like, we have enough. We have enough here. Well, guess what? When China starts building nuclear power plants just to train their AI models, and these AI models try to like steal the elections by creating fake bots that like do stuff, we'll build nuclear power plants. You know what I mean? Like it's because you will need AI to fight the other AI. Only AI will be able,
That's true.
these deep fakes. I sent you some like crazy things that are coming now in the election. We're not even in November yet. And like people are starting to do these crazy videos with AI. So I can't even imagine like 10 years from now, you just will not be able to trust anything you see on the internet. And you will need someone that's, an authority to tell you is this real or not. But now put yourself in the shoes of the Wall Street Journal. You get a breaking news from like someone on the ground in like Gaza that shows you a video. How do you know if it's real or not? You need an AI to determine whether an AI generated this video. The human eye will not be able to perceive that. And so that's by the way, I read a fascinating thing. You can't forge signatures anymore. Like AI is really good. If it gets to court, people can prove, is this your signature or has it been forged? Because like it
It's
picks up
crazy.
on the micro, like like the ink does, like it's crazy. Like so that's it. We're building nuclear power plants. There's not, no, seriously,
Build them.
it's not a choice. And it will also like solve climate change, because like to solve climate change we just need energy that doesn't pollute.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And in many ways, Bitcoin's going to be the biggest catalyst. AI, I would say too, but for nuclear for sure, the biggest catalyst for renewable. Listen, by far, by far. But what else happened this week that's been good?
what else happened this week? I mean, I don't know. I think enough stuff. Just the fact that we're breaking all-time highs on Bitcoin, the fact that it's holding at the all-time high level,
It's
even though
holding.
it dropped every time we hit like a high number, it drops violently, and then very quickly it goes back to where it was. So I think
I'm gonna show something here because this is like just to show my screen here. We're kind of watching this live as we're recording. This, I mean, this is a small little chart. I'm watching it live because I never do this. I do day charts at like the most zoomed in. This is, I think, a 5 day chart, but this is 5 minute increments. But this right here, this pattern goes up like this, and then this beautiful like channel down both ways. It's a bull flag. At some point, it's gonna break up. So uh, chances are. So this is like a nice little. It, we're about to go back to 70, and it's gonna be beautiful. This is like classic.
my technical analysis has everything to do about feng shui. I just look at the shapes. I like
Ooh,
look at the chart without my glasses, and I get it all blurry.
ooh,
Whatever it inspires in me, that's how I make my trading decisions. And I use the 1 minute candles.
a 30-second candle. It's a beautiful. If you're trading, which you should not take trading advice from either one of us
Do
because we're
not
both pretty
trade,
terrible.
buy and hold, and everything's going to be great. I mean, another thing that I wanted to say about Wall Street, and we spoke about that, we haven't even seen the effect of the ETFs, because the main effect of the ETFs would be when people add them to bigger ETFs that give you exposure to
Yeah.
the whole stock market, and it's happening. Today, I just tweeted there's like some sort of ETF that just gives you global exposure. Bitcoin's part of it, you know.
Yes.
Now it's going to
Yes.
start people in just in their 401ks and in their normal kind of saving for retirement for 30 years. Bitcoin's going to be part of that. That's why I really think that the cycles will not repeat, in the sense that it's like, a huge 3 year of up and then 1 year of violent down. It's not going to repeat like that. I think what's going to happen is the volatility will dampen and will just like go up. Yes, we will have drops of like 20, 30, 40, 50%, but it's not going to be like the halving. For example, you told me the halving is not going to have a huge effect, because like the reduction in supply is just not very significant versus the total market cap of the asset, you know. So it's like, yeah, we move from x bitcoin per day to like x divided by 2 bitcoin per day, but the bitcoin that I've already have in mind is like 10,000x, or 100,000x, so it doesn't really matter. What do you think? Will the cycle repeat itself
I
again?
think we'll have cycles. I think we're still having a couple more cycles. Wall Street will sell it. Look, they're not believers, man. They're degens. They're even worse than the crypto degens. They're gonna do this a couple of times until they harden. This thing, Bitcoin just hardens people. The cycles will become smaller. I think we still have a couple more. We still have a couple more in this. But look, the fact that it's going to go into 401ks, it'll keep dampening it. This is the whole point, right? More and more hardened hands, more and more people, 401ks, you buy it, you like, it's auto bought and you kind of forget about it. So people put in these funds and it will limit the downside because people won't go in selling. It'll be a 1%, 2% allocation. It will dampen the downside. But we use this after, in the long run, it will grow with the size of the market. This Bitcoin won't be an amazing investment in 100 years. It'll be just a good steady state,
Like,
steady Eddie, good investment.
yeah, it will
Yeah,
be like gold. It will just grow with the economy. But like when it grows at that rate, it will be, I think, $10 million per coin. Like until it
yeah,
reaches
I agree.
10 million, even at $1 million per coin, it's still small enough to move more than the market as more and more people put money in. Once
Agreed.
it like takes over all the value, then for sure it will grow slowly. And I also have to say two things. One is that it people are not buying the ETFs directly, but it will be part of bigger ETFs. And more importantly, they're still blocked, right? So, for example, my mother is in Israel, and she has access to all the like Schwab like things, but through an Israeli bank. And she literally told her banker, "I want you to buy IBIT for me." And the banker said, "No, I can't do it for you. Only you can do it from your computer at home because,
Oh
like,
my
the
God.
SEC just approved it and we're not comfortable with it." Now, my mother's a doctor. She's a dermatologist. She's not going to buy a stock from her home. Like, all her investments have been done by her talking to a real estate guy or talking to a banker over the phone and giving instructions over the phone. So, like, just imagine how many people like my mother, and basically, my mother wants to buy Bitcoin. She's like, "How can I buy Bitcoin?" And I tell her, and it's always hard because, like, yeah, you have to KYC and you have to wire money. And in Israel, it's even harder because, like, the exchanges take a 10% fee because, like, of the fiat rails that are not good enough, and you have more fraud and stuff. So,
It's so much friction.
exactly. And so, imagine once, like, she has a 401k, she has a retirement plan, and just like global stock market, and automatically a portion of it goes into Bitcoin. It's just going, how many people like that are there? How much capital like this is trapped outside,
400
waiting
trillion.
for return? Yeah, 400 trillion is the overall.
400 trillion.
Anything else
To the moon.
cover, my dear friend?
No, my dear friend, let's celebrate today. It's been a good day, good price action. It's holding nice. It's trading for an hour at like post 69, which we didn't have before. Before it went up, crashed down. I mean, within maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And the first time it did the same thing, 5 minutes crashed. Now it's holding steady. Let it hold steady. This is a very good sign. Our friends, it's not too late. Just buy. We keep saying this all the time. Go back to every episode. We're proven right over and over and over. Not financial advice.
Non-investment advice, entertainment purposes only.
Entertainment purposes only. Buy what you want. I take it back. Just buy what you want. But me and Shimon are buying more.
Buy what you
All
want,
right, my friend.
we want it, and we hope that you're entertained.
Yes. Are you not entertained, as they say? Well, Shimon, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great evening.
You too,
And
Alex.
we'll talk soon.
Talk to you
Bye bye.
soon. Bye.